we can do it.
I'm ready.
Perfect. Let's do it.
All right.
Hello, everybody. I'm today with Adam Swaab, one great Houdini master. Hello, Adam.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm fine. Hello, everybody in the chat. Do not hesitate to tell us if the sound is good, if you can hear correctly, or anything. So we will not miss anything. So thank you, Adam. Can you introduce yourself shortly?
Yeah, so my name is Adam Swaab. I am an old man who sits in front of a computer most of the time. I don't want to tell you guys how old I am, but I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a creative director at Wolf and Crow. I occasionally direct live action things as well, but most of the time I'm doing visual effects and design and working on motion graphics and commercial campaigns. And if you're familiar with my work, you'll see that a lot of it is um, pretty technical, but stylistically very dark usually. And I love fluid effects and I love simulations and combining all of those things with really interesting textures and patterns and shaders and stuff like that. And that's kind of my jam.
Yeah, maybe you can show a quick overview of your latest work or maybe your latest work so people can have an idea.
Yeah, so I'm going to show here. This is an older reel, or this is my live action site or my director site, which isn't completely updated here. But I'm going to show a couple pieces off of here. I'll end up probably just starting with my general Houdini reel, which you can see is from 2016, so it's a little bit outdated. But this will show a lot of the work that I do. I'll just kill the volume on that. So what you're seeing here, obviously there are pieces that are team efforts, but there's a lot that I'm personally responsible for on all this stuff, whether it's the design and the animation or all the visual effects, or in cases like what you're seeing here, the full deal with the exception of compositing there. And I work with other directors. Like this one, I was working with G Monk. This was working with Andrew Thomas Wang, piece I directed for myself. And it's just a mixture of all different kinds of stuff. I love big, exciting, dynamic camera moves and lots of choreography, lots of particles.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And everybody, if you want to check the Adam's work, you can, of course, follow the link through the description. You have his website, Instagram, and everything. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a bit old. It's amazing watching some of this stuff and knowing how the tools have evolved and thinking about all the pain I went through back when I was making these things and knowing how much easier they are literally only 3 or 4 years later. It's pretty amazing how far things have come in the last few years.
Yeah, it's evolving pretty fast. And offline, we were talking about your style. It's pretty dark, as you said. Do you have personal inspiration or stuff that leaded you to this style?
Um, I'm looking at a lot of the things that probably other people are looking at. Obviously, I love the stuff that Simon Holmdahl and Man vs. Machine does. I love the stuff that Korb does. Future Deluxe is doing some amazing things. Just if we're talking about visual arts, motion graphics specifically, like those are the other people that I think are doing the same style of work as what I'm interested in doing. And obviously at Wolf and Crow, we've created a pretty good place for that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, I'm not overall like looking at tons and tons of art and artists and things out there. Usually it's a lot of self-initiated explorations and discoveries. And I will go on Pinterest and I'll probably show this here right as the reel is ending, just in terms of kind of where and the kind of stuff that I'm mostly looking at is I tend to go on Pinterest here, and I have a board that I kind of just put everything in, which is where is that going to be? It's going to be under like cold minimal abstract. I have a lot of stuff that I put in here. I have a lot of fashion art that I look at um, when I'm looking at data generative art. So like these are the kind of things that I'm really looking at. It's more pictures
Yeah.
than it is stuff in motion. And I'm always looking at these pictures and thinking, how do you bring this stuff into motion? How do you take this kind of stuff and make it really interesting? So this is the kind of stuff that I'm looking at much more than I'm looking at other motion artists and motion designers. And I love Iris Van Herpen, by the way. For those who aren't familiar with her, um, fashion is absolutely amazing. A lot of her stuff is 3D printed combined with like thousands of hours of manual hand stitching and laboring and stuff. So like I have a whole board just for fashion and has a lot of stuff of Iris Van Herpen's in here as well. And then of course there's all the generative data stuff, which I'm sure everybody in motion graphics community has a giant board like that. And then there's a lot of generative stuff that I look at. So these are really the kinds of things that I'm looking at. And then I also tend to look at sculpture. Um, so I have a few pieces that I was working on for Instagram that were inspired by these kind of things, where you have real works of art that are frozen in time, and then thinking about how do we take stuff like this and actually bring this into something in motion. So I actually maybe could show that because that was inspiration for this piece here. So I'll actually show this as a good example of a direct inspiration, and then my response to it as a motion piece, which was something like that. And then thinking, how do we take that and actually build that as my own thing that becomes something that's interesting and kind of cool to look at. So these are really the kinds of things that I'm interested in when I'm looking at when I'm doing my work.
Yeah,
Much more, like I said, much more than other designers. I think it's a little bit too circular in that sense. You know what I mean? If all you're looking at are
yeah,
motion artists and motion artists are looking at other motion artists, then you kind of end up with a lot of things that look the same. So you want to kind of expand and build on what you're doing and make sure that things you're looking at are outside of the world of motion graphics.
yeah. That's really interesting to see the workaround and how you start from real elements to create things. And also, do you have some films or some music that inspire you, maybe?
Not, honestly, I don't listen to much music at all. I tend to just when I'm working have nothing happening because it distracts me when I'm thinking. So I either have to have something that is like I have like a Spotify. This is so lame. I have like a Spotify playlist that's probably right now 3 or 4 years old, and I listen to the same 8 hours worth of songs or 6 hours worth of songs throughout the day, pretty much every day. It's really repetitive, but at the same time, it doesn't interrupt my thinking, so I'm not distracted by what's going on because I really do try to think a lot when I'm working, and I think that's one thing people don't understand is when you sit in front of a computer for 8 to 10 hours a day and you come home and you're exhausted, and people are like, "Why are you exhausted? You sat down for 8 hours," and you're like, "You don't understand what it's like to think really hard for 8 hours or 10 hours during your day. It's exhausting."
Yeah, and it's pretty fun to hear your feedback because I've ended in a situation where most of the people works in a company, and I also have a company, but I work alone at home because I can't work with external noises and stuff. So that's pretty great to hear someone that needs silence to work.
Yeah, I mean, part of it might be, there's things where, like, just in general, I have issues with loud noises and stuff like that. So I really, really like silence. I'd almost rather just work in silence the whole day. But yeah, there are a few people I know that are like me, like that. But it's generally not too common. Most people I know are like blaring music all day long while they're working.
Yeah, so um, we ask this question most of the time. It's pretty generic, but maybe you will find a way really interesting. Do you have some advice for starting motion designers? It could be a general advice.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this as somebody who sees lots and lots of reels and has tried to hire people. And I'm going to take this from the perspective of you're a student and you want to try to find a job out of school, or you want to make something distinct. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with inspiration. So I see so many reels that look like poorly done copies of other people's work of inspiration that is it's really transparent what the inspiration is and what the student is trying to do. And I would say 9 times out of 10, we would rather hire somebody that isn't quite as technically proficient, but has their own voice and is doing their own unique, distinct things and their own distinct way of thinking. And that's one thing that I would really, really want to push students toward is it's okay to try to break down other people's work, and it's okay to try to figure out their process. But when all you are able to look at as a potential hirer, somebody hiring students or recent grads, and you look at people whose work just looks the same and generic, it's not appealing to an employer, and it's not appealing in a creative field as well. So what I would say as general advice to students is really, really work on trying to find your own voice and your own distinct thing that makes you unique, because that's something nobody else has. Then that's the thing that's going to make you special, and that's the thing that's going to really make you stand out, is finding that voice and that thing that is you. And that's tough. It's tough to do as a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old. It takes a lot of time to figure that out. But the earlier and the earliest that you can get that going, I think is the most beneficial thing that you can do. It's much more important than learning the tools, because tools are easy. I mean, in my opinion, I know a lot of people struggle with the tools, but to me, a tool is just a thing for you to get your ideas down on a screen. It's not the ideas themselves. And when people approach motion graphics or design as this is the tool makes the art, that's not true. The tool is just the extension of your brain. Your brain is what's making the art. And if you can get that thinking done in that way, I think you're going to be so much more successful just as a person and as an artist. So,
Yeah, wise words. That's yeah, really true. And I have a few questions in the chat, and someone asking, what's your background? Do you have a programmer or comp background?
no, I do not. So I don't even have a animation background or computer animation background in the traditional sense, meaning I didn't receive an education for that. I went to a school on the US. It's called Rhode Island School of Design. And for those who know it, it's a pretty well known art school in America. It's known for being very arty and not so much involved in computers and that kind of stuff. It's changed quite a bit. Again, I went to school back before the year 2000. I will say that to date myself. So that was a long time ago. And computer animation was barely a thing at that point. And if you'll recall, it was incredibly, incredibly expensive machines. So when I went there, actually, I was doing a lot of painting and drawing, illustration, and I came out of there with a major in filmmaking and actually moved to Los Angeles with the intentions of becoming a cinematographer, and moved out to Los Angeles in the middle of an actor strike. So that means that there was no film work or production work going on throughout the entire city of Los Angeles when I moved out here. So I ended up kind of falling back on my other skills and ended up in a design company just as a production assistant. So that means I was getting sandwiches and taking lunch orders and really not doing much. And after a couple of years, I was animating, and from that point on, it was really survival mode, where you have to feed yourself and pay your rent. And somehow, I just kind of fell in love with animation and motion graphics, and taught myself programming and all the 3D programs and all that other stuff. And the situation, the landscape was totally different in the early 2000s as opposed to now. They're just the resources for learning by yourself just weren't there. So you just had to struggle and try to find some forums where you could get a little bit more information. But the structured learning environment just it wasn't there like it is now. Here it's so easy, and you have such access to really great learning materials online. So that's kind of my background, is taught myself pretty much everything. Yep.
That's pretty great. So someone told that it's really impressed that you have this level only working 8 hours a day.
Well, you get efficient. I mean, I learned that I generally do the work of two people in one day. So, and that was when I was working a 10-hour or 12-hour day, like I would be. doing quite a bit of work, and so I just had to back off a little bit of my time and still be productive. I think the main thing is trying to be productive while you're working, filtering out all the meetings and the BS and the time wasting that goes into a job. I mean, if you go into a motion graphics company or a CG company and you really walk around, you see a lot of time wasting happening. Um, I'm sure as somebody who owns a company, you'll know that as well. But there's lots of time wasting, and you know that there's ways to just be more efficient, more disciplined with what you're doing. And part of that comes from really having a good plan about what you want to accomplish during the day and making sure you're hitting those goals throughout the day.
Yeah, it was also part of our latest live with A Design, and also regarding the creativity and creative blocks, sometime by not working too much and having a free mind, you are by far more effective than someone spending 10 or 12 hours a day.
Yeah, well, it's not good for you. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for your body. It's not healthy for your mind. And I think, you know, most people will find once they get older that when you've done about 20 years of 12-hour days, it really adds up, and it adds up on your body and it adds up on your mind. And you realize that, you've accomplished your goals in terms of making work that other people are looking at, which is a great goal to have. But then the other goal is like, okay, I have a life. My life can't just be sitting in front of a computer all day. There are other things in the world to do. And I think when you get a little bit older, your priorities shift a bit, especially when you're like me, you've just had a kid. So kids definitely change a lot. And I think my whole work day has changed a lot. Just basically having another human being to take care of and know that this person needs me. So definitely changed a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty great to hear. So, someone asked if Vex was your first programming language.
No, no. Okay, so the very first things that I started to learn, Cinema 4D, when I was working in C4D, had a programming language called Coffee. And that was the very first thing that I actually tried to do. And after that, and I learned that Coffee was not appropriate for doing the plugin that I wanted, I ended up having to teach myself C++. And for anybody who wants to learn C++, I will recommend it. Was a book that was called something like Teach Yourself C++ in 21 Days or Learn C++ in 21 Days. And I never got past day 8, period. So I will let you know it is absolutely doable to learn most of what you need to know within 7 to 8 days of dedicated time in terms of coding. So I learned C++ that way. And then after C++, started to learn a little bit of Python, and then Vex is the final thing here. But what you'll learn is, and I'll take C++ as an example, is it's more about thinking. It's more about logical thinking when you're programming and coding. And it's not so much about the language, because the language is really just a format. It's that simple. It's like poetry in that sense, right? You have couplets and triplets and, sonnets and that kind of things, but they're just words that are put together, and the words express your thoughts. And it's just a format. So like the difference between Python and C++, yeah, there's memory management issues and stuff like that, but it's mostly just format. Like, do you use tabs or do you just press enter and use colons? And I know we're getting into kind of specific programming talk, but it's not that complicated. And I think the other thing that scares people from coding, and I'm going to say this just because, again, I do teaching and I talk to a lot of students, and people are really scared of coding, and it's nothing to be scared of. People think that coding equals math, and that is a completely false assumption. Coding is logic. It's a lot of like, if this happens, then do this thing. Really simple stuff. And the mathematics that you use when you're programming and coding, for the most part, they're things that you learned in middle school. They're not advanced algebra. There's nothing like that. It's mostly just plus, minus, divide, multiply. So don't confuse programming with math, and just remember that it's really just kind of a language, and that's it. It's really simple.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the advice. Also, if you have time, maybe you can give an advice but this time for professional.
For motion graphics professionals.
Yeah, motion graphics professional. If you have any kind of advice, um,
Um, yeah, it's well, what I've learned. I'm gonna give this from the perspective of somebody who wants to advance in their career. Like, let's say somebody who right now is a an art director and wants to move up to a creative director position, or somebody who's a designer and wants to move up to an art director position. Communication is incredibly important. Being able to express your thoughts, being able to sell a vision can sometimes be much more important than making a nice frame. There are a lot of people that can make nice frames, but clients don't usually buy nice frames. That's not usually what they're after. What they're after is your vision for what it's going to be. And sometimes having a nice frame isn't enough. You have to be able to talk about what it means and what it's going to do and how it affects the client and the brand and all that other stuff. But not just that, as you advance in your career, what you find is that you do a lot less work personally yourself and you're doing a lot of management of other people. So being able to express your thoughts and being able to take your hands back for a little bit and be comfortable with what other people are doing and guiding them, I think is part of that process. So it is important to push your creativity, but it's just as important to learn how to talk about your ideas and express them in a way that give other people the freedom to do what they're going to do, but also make people, clients specifically, feel comfortable with your vision. And yeah, it's something that I've been working on quite a bit the last couple of years as I deal more and more with clients and writing treatments and pitches is how to write effective treatments and pitches and put reference in that really makes clients excited. I will say one thing that we do at Wolf and Crow is we do a lot less original design work when it comes to doing pitches and doing treatments. A lot of what we do now is pulling reference because what we've learned is that it's definitely more important to be talking about the reference in the plan than it is to necessarily show an original frame, especially early on when you're trying to have those creative discussions. Once once you show the client a frame, then they'll either attach themselves to it or they'll completely detach, right? They'll say, that's completely not for us. We're not going to do it. You're not hired. Or they say, that's it. We don't want anything else different than that. And you don't have that middle ground where it becomes a conversation. So what we try to do is make it a conversation. And that lets us partner with the clients so that things continue to evolve during the process. And, it becomes much more successful that way. So it's a little kind of businessy stuff. And we're seeing how well that works for us. I think it's been pretty good the last couple of years as we've been developing that. Um, and also, pitches don't have lots of fees to them too, as you know. So it becomes really tough to hire designers to help with that kind of stuff when there's no money. So you're already losing money just to try to make a job. So it's about resources and managing everything. I don't know if that's too much business talk in there or if that's you're looking for something a little more creative there.
no, that's pretty interesting, and it's the kind of advice the community is looking for to get better and totally trust you. Communication is everything, even for yourself, your partners know your needs, but also know the client needs and how to express is the key. Even in life, it helps a lot. So maybe you have some resources, books or videos that can help people. Maybe if you have one or two links, I don't know.
Well, I've been following Chris Do on Twitter, and I think a lot of people follow Chris Do. He has a website he does called The Futur, Futur, where he talks a lot about the business of design.
Yeah.
I think he's a really interesting person to follow. I'm not sure if I agree 100% with everything he says, but I think it's a really interesting perspective to look at. And he certainly is good about talking about the issues that we face as designers and people trying to manage clients and client expectations and stuff. I think he's really interesting to follow. In terms of like creative stuff, mostly I say just get out to and see art. There's no substitute for getting out to museums and going and experiencing the world and finding your personal passion there. And then for learning stuff, you know, I'm mostly part of the reason I got into doing tutorials and stuff is I found the resources out there to be really inadequate. So obviously, like, I'm going to promote myself, meaning like I do really nice stuff. Check it out. Although some of it's a bit outdated, I would say. Um, but I have liked, at least for Houdini, I think Stephen Nipping does some really nice stuff. Knipping, when it comes to more of the traditional visual effects pipelines. I think that CGMA does have a couple of really nice course offerings there, so they're worth looking into. Um, there's not enough. I don't think that there's enough stuff online that bridges that gap between a traditional art and design school and a technical trade school information that you see. So I think a lot of the things that I'm going to be doing when I start publishing tutorials again is trying to bridge that gap. One thing I did notice is when I'm doing these classes. So the CGMA class, I was talking to you offline about that. I work with students from all over the world, and what I've seen is there is a real shortage of opportunities for people in certain parts of the world to get a good design education. I have a lot of students from Asia. I have a lot of students from the Middle East, and it seems like those resources aren't readily available over there. And I think that there's a really good market out there for creating things that bridge that gap between traditional art school and trade school and making that available to the community at large. I wish that those resources were out there in the world. It seems like there are these like master class things where you have, like traditional American scholars. When I say scholars, I mean like you have like Aaron Sorkin teaching screenwriting, or you have Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine teaching guitar. Those are, I don't know how good those things are. They're pretty high priced. I think they're supposed to be pretty good, but like I think about my design education from RISD, and I don't think that there's an equivalent that you can get online. And I wish that there was a little bit more like that. So if somebody does know of a resource, like I would love to hear about that personally so that I can refer other people to it. But I don't know where you get that traditional art background from unless you're going to an art school.
Yeah, that's definitely the hardest thing, and also internet is a bit a wide range to things to check. So sometimes you can also go in a gap and find not that good content and stuff. So
Yeah, but I mean the American system here, I don't know what it's like in France, but the American system is really messed up where students are coming out of school with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt just from going to college. And I don't think that that's right. I think that there has to be an avenue where you can get a good education for, you know, $20,000 or $30,000 total. You shouldn't have to come out with that kind of debt as a 22-year-old person. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense in the world. It's not right.
yeah,
So, um, I'm sure all the students here would agree with me too. They don't want to come out of school and already feel like they're so behind and trying to dig themselves out of a financial hole just to succeed in the world. And there's got to be other avenues for people.
actually, it's pretty the same in France, and that's even worse because our whole mindset was to have the maximum amount of free schools and but the thing is we have a big rise of private schools, and I give lessons in private schools, and they ask a lot of monies to students, and most of the time it's just business, so they refer to the teachers to make good content. So even the schools are like, we have money, we will try to hire someone good, and he will make the job. And that's really hard to know that students are paying a lot the structure, but the structure is not making that much for them.
Yeah, and also like so you come out of school and you have a degree, right? But when's the last time that an employer asked? Maybe they do this in France. In America, nobody asks to see your college degree.
It's
They don't
exactly the
care.
same.
Right,
Nobody
exactly.
asks. So
They want to know that you're working and that your work is good and that you have a reel, right? So there's definitely other avenues for people to take. And yeah, it's definitely a problem in the modern world, and something's going to be changing, I think, pretty soon. I think I read that Google and Facebook and Apple were no longer having college degrees as a requirement for hiring people, which I think is an important step forward
Yeah,
as well.
that's great. Maybe in the five latest minutes, maybe you can show some tips and tricks or something interesting that you've done in Houdini lately, so people can have an idea of what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm gonna show something here. It's not so much a tip and trick, but it is going to be talking about finding resources to help you solve problems. And some of it's going to be a little technical, but I'm going to show something that I'm working on right now. And I'm going to pull up a little movie that I'm working on here. And I think it's actually in my delete me stuff. Or did I put it in the trash already? Let's see. Let me hide this. Sorry about my disorganization here. Did I end up putting that in the trash? Yes, I did. All right, let me grab that one here. So specifically, what I'm working on at the moment in my free time is a little tool that does thin sheet detection for fluid simulation. So on the right here, you can see a traditional fluid simulation that explodes and gives these ugly, gross looking blobs that don't look like exploding paint. And I think most people who are doing fluid simulations are familiar with getting this kind of ugly look. And so actually examines what's happening and creates the sheet fluids. So the question is, how did I arrive here and what did I need to do to get there? And I'm not going to go through the exact technical process of it, but I am going to tell you about how I went about solving this problem and starting to work on some of this kind of stuff here. So some of these technical things was Googling flip fluid thin sheets and starting to see what technical information there was that people were using to solve these kinds of problems out there. And I came across an interesting
Oh, we have a bit of delay.
white find the okay. I can wait.
I don't know if it's related to what you show, but
Did I
started.
break the internet?
You break the internet a bit.
I broke the whole internet. All right, so I'm gonna. Are we back? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna show at least this white paper that I found, and I'm gonna be totally honest. This thing is um, totally intimidating to me as well. Um, but that's part of the point is like looking at things that are intimidating and starting to figure out how you go from something that's intimidating to something that is achievable. And it's about general problem solving. And I think one thing that I always try to tell people is there's no such thing as a big problem. There's only a bunch of small problems. And if you solve all the small problems, then you solve the big problems. And that's kind of how you go about doing these things is you try to break down every problem into the smallest component. And then once you start checking those off one by one, then you end up solving the bigger problems. And for me, there are so many issues with these things here. And I'm going to talk specifically just about this paper. Like when I look at this stuff, I don't know what's going on here, right? I have to look and go through all of this stuff here and try to figure out what are they talking about here? What do the double bars mean? All this other stuff. And part of this is reading the same thing over and over again, doing research on scientific notation or formula notation until you understand this stuff. And then part of that is just even understanding the abstraction of what they're talking about. So I'm going to get to like all this other stuff here, which is the juicy part that I love when looking at white papers, which are really nice pictures. So sometimes I ignore all this stuff that's up here. and I just look at the pictures. And that's basically what I was doing. So their whole thing, at least with this paper, is how do you find out where a thin sheet is going to be, and then how do you fill that with particles, right? If we break it down into the two components, that's what's needed. And you can use the methods that they're using inside the paper, or you can come up with your own methods. So for me, their method of actually finding out where this stuff is happening was too complex in a mathematical sense. So I found my own way and just cheated it. And it doesn't use what's in the paper. It's worse than what the paper did, but it's my own version. And that's part of this as well. Like, you don't have to follow things that are out here. It's more about breaking down the problems and solving the small problems, and not necessarily taking every step that somebody else took to get there. So that was number one. And then number two is then starting to understand what's happening in this kind of stuff here. And like I said, a lot of these white papers will do the pictures, which are worth much, much more than the words, because sometimes you can look at a picture and understand exactly what's happening without even reading this kind of stuff. So for me, I say white papers are all about the pictures. And this one's really easy in terms of what it's saying, in terms of putting particles here, which is like you have a bunch of particles that get scattered in between the breaking up sheets, and then you just look at the sphere around the particles, and if a particle is inside the sphere of another particle, you just kill it and it's gone, and then you get this nice picture here. So when you break it down to those two analytical steps, then you can start making up your own methods to do this kind of stuff, instead of looking at these things, compute covariance around P by equation 8, right? That sounds like total nonsense to me. I don't even know what this means. So again, people look at what I do and they think I understand everything, and that's completely false. I don't understand a lot of what I'm doing. I just try to find my own methods by looking at the abstraction of the problem. And if you can look at problems as an abstraction rather than as specific steps to take, it becomes so much easier to solve. So that's a little thing just on like technical stuff. And again, I'm going to probably talk about that kind of stuff more from that technical perspective, just because there are lots and lots of artists out there that can give you like, here's how you would do it in Cinema 4D. Here's how you would do it in this program. But like, I'd rather be much more general about how I talk about stuff. So it's a small tip. Maybe one person out of 1,000 found that useful. But hopefully it was useful to that one person. That's just what I'm currently working on at the moment. So that's the first thing that popped into my head, is like, I have a little bit of a very hard problem to solve, and I'm wrapping my brain around trying to solve it. And from that test, you can see so far it's looking like it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess you don't have much more time yet, so maybe you have a few things to say before we close the live.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for reaching out to me and doing this interview and featuring me on your page. I'm really happy about that. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, everybody who's been tuning in and listening, and hopefully I've made some sense about what I'm talking about. And, just keep making work and pushing yourselves, everybody that's out there. And remember, it's not about the tools. It's about what you're doing with them. Tools are just an extension of your mind. So, yeah, that's really it.
Yeah, thank you for your live. It was really great to hear your whole mindset and see a bit more inside your work. I guess everybody enjoyed the video, and we will
Oh
follow
yeah, and
you closely.
feel free to check out my other stuff. I didn't really get to play a lot of the other work that's out here, so I'll just kind of like thumb through it really quickly. Excuse me. Yeah, this is a short film that I was working on before I had a kid, and then the kid came and nothing else happened with this film. So I'm still wanting to work on this thing. So this isn't dead, for people who always ask me that question, like, are you still working on that? That's the general answer to that one. And do check out our work at Wolf and Crow, and excuse me. Yeah, and keep doing great work out there, everybody.
Yeah, I've added the links to the description, so people feel free to check the Vimeo link and Instagram and website to have a better idea in better resolution than YouTube, to have the work.
All right. Well, thank you. I gotta head off to work now myself.
Yeah. Have a great day of work.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.